Hello and welcome to the September 10th Knowledge Management webinar for APQC. We're so happy to see you all here. Our apologies, we are 1 minute late in getting started today. So we're calling today to Tuesday is the new Monday for us this week. So we're going to have a great time today, though. We've got a great message for you today on engagement strategies for excellence in KM. And I am Lynda Braksiek, the research lead for knowledge management here at APQC. And I'm joined by two of my most wonderful favorite people from the company of Mercer, who will be talking about their engagement strategies for their excellent knowledge management program. And I'm very excited to have them here today. This is going to be interactive, as always, for our knowledge management audience. We love to have you get involved in the chat, ask questions, put something in the discussion, talk to one another, just learn from each other as we go through the day. We're going to just give you a little bit of brief insight of things that are up and coming at APQC, a little bit of research insights to get the conversation started, and then I will quickly turn it over to our guest speakers, where we will talk about engagement strategies. And they've got a great approach today. They're going to talk to you a little bit about what they do, but they've got some great case studies to share with you as well, which we love case studies. And then, as always, we will provide you resources at the end of this presentation. Remember also that this webinar is recorded and that you will be provided the recording and the slides immediately, well, within 24 hours of the webinar. And it will also be available in our resource library once we have completed it. And just as a couple of reminders, I'd like to keep you always in the know of what's happening at APQC. And we've got some great things coming up to round out our year this year in 2024. We've got a couple more webinars talking about change readiness and risk mitigation as it relates to change. We've got a great presentation from another member, Novartis, coming up in November to talk about their AI approach for knowledge management, so it should be exciting. We also have a couple of member roundtable discussions coming up, one actually in 2 weeks and another one in December, one on the topic of communities of practice, and one on the topic of the future of the role of KM and the expertise and what that's going to look like going forward. So if you're interested and a member, please remember to sign up for those roundtable discussions. And then, as always, we like to remind you that we have a knowledge manager certification course. So if that's something you're interested in, please go check it out. Okay, so excellence in knowledge management. This is something that APQC started back in 2019. So we're in our 6th year of excellence recipients. The program was created to really recognize organizations that excel at knowledge management in 4 areas specifically: strategy, people, process, and content and IT. And to qualify to be an excellence in KM organization, we ask that your organization be at least at a level 3 maturity as a business unit or as an enterprise. And I'm going to tell you what that is here in just a second. But Mercer, our guests today, are at a I'm going to round up 4.7 level of maturity this year. And they are in their 6th year also of being a recipient and being recognized as an excellent in KM organization. So super exciting to have them here. They always are doing amazing things in their organization. Also, in our resource library at APQC, you can find past case studies and webinars and other content from other excellent in KM recipients as well. So lots of great things out there if you're interested in seeing what some of those great KM organizations are doing. So just to give you a little insight, what do I mean when I say level 3 maturity? APQC has a knowledge management maturity model based on 5 levels, all the way from having a more ad hoc knowledge going on in your organization, knowledge sharing, all the way to truly continuously improving your practices and dynamic knowledge flowing through the organization efficiently and effectively. So this actually is the basis for our diagnostic tool that we call the KM CAT, or the Capability Assessment Tool. And that's how we ask people to measure the maturity levels of their organizations. And that is the tool that Mercer used to reach their level of maturity. It's a great way to just help you identify your roadmap from moving from one level of maturity to the next. It's a great way to get started with a program, just to see what do we have in place today and where can we go in the future. And one other thing I want to say is a lot of our research going forward, we will be putting more emphasis on what do mature organizations do, as opposed to maybe what beginning organizations do. So you can really begin to relate to some of the research you see and realize that we can't all be at the same level at the same time. So let's give you some practices on how to get started. What do I do when I'm starting to move up that maturity level? Okay, so now to set the stage for today, the reason, one of the reasons that we wanted Mercer to come and talk to us, obviously because they have some excellent KM practices, but also because the topic of engagement and managing change is just really top of mind for all KM functions right now. And you can see from the research the last 3 years, and I think even before that, change management has been at the top of the list of those skill sets for knowledge management teams to develop. So we continue to try, we continue to focus on it, but those human-centric skill sets are really, really powerful and really, really effective in helping to mature your KM capability in your organization. And I think you're going to see that come through with what you hear from Mercer today. Also, we've just finished an actual change management survey last month, and this is taking a look at the effectiveness of the change capabilities within organizations based on their maturity level. You can see on the right side of this screen, those folks that are at a level 3 to 5 that we consider more mature in their KM capabilities are at least moderately effective, if not up to extremely effective, 68% of the time, as opposed to those that are at their beginning level of maturity for knowledge management. So just keep this in mind that it's a journey, and focusing on managing effectiveness of your change practices and engagement is something you're going to continue to do throughout the journey of your knowledge management program. And then finally, one other thing I thought was fascinating by our change research was what people use for measurements and the frequency that they use this based on, again, the maturity level of the organization. Look at that difference. Those folks that are more mature are more consistently leveraging these important change measurements to make sure that they are effectively managing the implementation of their KM initiative. So everything from employee feedback to training attendance to KPIs for your project, stakeholder satisfaction, observations of the behavioral change that's going on. So just some things to keep in mind. Again, you're going to see some of these come to life as you hear Tiffany and Lisa throughout the rest of our webinar today. So with that, that was the really quick beginning and intro so that we can get to our guest speakers. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, I think is going to get us kickstarted for Mercer. Welcome.
Thanks, Lynda. Tiffany, we're so happy to be here. What we thought we'd do today, first, I'm going to give a little background on Mercer, just in case you don't know who we are. And we're going to talk about our experience with stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, key roles and key skills. And Tiffany's going to share 3 examples, 3 little mini vignette case studies of what's worked for us in the past. Worked, not worked, what we've learned. So there's a whole range. And then we'll do a wrap up. We have 3 polls planned, so we're hoping to keep this interactive. I also scanned the attendee list. There are at least 4 other Mercer teammates on the call. So Mercer peeps, you are welcome to put in chat anything Tiffany I forget to say. Let's just make this interactive and we'll have fun with it. So by way of background, let's do the poll first. So first question, rate the level of engagement you currently experience with your stakeholders for KM. And there's 5 possible, so from very high all the way down to non-existent. And that's kind of just where you're at today. We can appreciate in Mercer over the years, things ebb and flow. So kind of when there are leadership changes, when there are subject matter experts that come and go, when there are functional people you have to work with in the different units, things can ebb and flow. So it's never one and done, but just sort of where are you at today?
Yeah, and Lisa, I think when we were putting this poll together, we were talking about, how if it's a project or something that's very close to the stakeholders' hearts, we get lots of interaction, lots of engagement. But when it's something that we're sort of pushing out, sometimes it's a little bit harder to get the attention of those folks, especially if they're off doing client work or whatever. So I think it ebbs and flows in that regard too. But I think generally you can usually gauge where you're getting more visibility within your organization, or just having that connection with your stakeholders on a more regular basis.
So it looks like from the results, it's kind of stacked. So we have a few outliers on the very high and the non-existent, and then a whole bunch high, medium, low. So we're on the whole range. So maybe, as we go through this, you'll pick up something if you're in the high range. If you're in the low range, maybe you'll pick up some techniques and tips that have worked for us. So I think let's move ahead. So who we are. We are Mercer. We are part of Marsh and McLennan. We are a leading global services firms that bring together the best in risk, strategy, and people. So we have 4 subsidiary sister companies. We have Marsh, which is insurance, Guy Carpenter, which is reinsurance, Mercer, that's us, for health, wealth, career consulting. The buyer, typically HR leaders. And then Oliver Wyman, which is our strategic, economic, and brand consulting, more traditional business management. So we're 25,000 employees around the world, 5 billion in revenue, just over 5 last year. So that's where we fit in. If we move forward, thinking a little bit about our journey. So Lynda mentioned in the beginning, everybody's on their own journey. You sort of have different places where you're at, different maturity. Our program prior to 2008, very informal. We had a lot of moonlighters, ad hoc. If your business unit had funding to pay for a knowledge manager, a knowledge coordinator, they did it, but there was no cohesion. 2008 was a turning point. We started to align. We were not consistent. We were still working in silos, but at least we started to come together as a KM unit. 2017 was the turning point. All the businesses who had knowledge management staff, we came together under one umbrella. We became one team, and we started to sort of unify together. And then since 2022, same team, but we've actually extended our footprint across the enterprise. Lynda mentioned the maturity model. You can see our timeline. We probably would have been a level 1 way back, moved up to a 2, moved up to 3. Since 2017 and onward, we've been in the 4 range. Lynda, I think you were very generous and gave us a higher score than what we actually are. I think we're 4.34. If you have not done this and you have an APQC membership, it is well worth the time, and you get to work with the fabulous Darcy, who will do your analysis and recommendations. So what's worked for us is we've always had a really strong partnership with the business leaders. I work very closely with finance and HR, not just during the transformation when we globalized our team, but onward since then. We're on a single budget, so I have visibility into staffing costs, headcount, all that good stuff. We were originally what we considered cost neutral. So in 2017, when we made changes and came together, I didn't promise we would save money. I said, just let me be cost neutral for a few years. And then I built the business case collectively, our whole team. Can we increase? Can we hire more? Can we do more? And what has helped is no matter where you are around the world, what stakeholders you're supporting, what domains of knowledge you're supporting, you kind of sort of have the same job. So we have consistent role descriptions. We recruit and hire for certain skills. We have a global standard performance process. So we really do feel like one team around the world. So that's been helpful. When you think about how we work all day, so there are different roles on our team. Tiffany is what we call a knowledge management leader. Under her are several knowledge specialists, and they need to support what I call the kaleidoscope. So back in the day, in the early years, we probably would have been very focused on our practices and solutions. We're a consulting firm. We sell knowledge to other organizations in the healthcare, wealth, and career space. So anything the HR buyer would care about, a little bit with an investment buyer. We moved that footprint. We added in our ops and tech hubs. We added in marketing, thought leadership, and sales. Industries are a very big thing right now for us because you have to know the landscape of what's happening in the marketplace for certain industries in order to deliver services. We have acquisitions and divestitures, both in what we advise clients on, and we have our own acquisitions and divestitures. We're growing year after year and bringing in new services and products into the firm. We respond quickly to these pulsing topics. COVID hit us hard, 2020, Russia, Ukraine, AI, all these things that are hot things we have to quickly respond to. And then our sister companies. So back to that Marsh McLennan model, we do work across the 4 entities. So skills are really important. So the next poll we want to ask is, and this ties back to the research Lynda shared at the beginning, is what are the most important skills you think for a successful KM model and KM structure within the organization? So we put a couple listed. We have 6 listed. If there's something else, put it in chat. We'd love to hear what else is on your mind.
And Lisa, on this one, I think it's always interesting because within Mercer, we've heard on several occasions that, you know, KM is the glue or the connector. We bring people together. You know, we always know how to make those connections for people internally. So I do think that's kind of a skill in itself, just to make, you know, to learn how to navigate, to know who the right people are, to make sure that we're helping people get connected to people.
And I see a comment from Maya Dai. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. What do you mean by important? Is it what I think it should be or what it is? And it can be both. I would say, you know, what makes you successful? So what should it be? What are the skills you think have the most impact, the most influence, the most, you know, the glue that can keep your KM program going with stakeholders? So we're really all over the board. There are a handful. Building relationships, 1/3 of the group. Effectively communicating, just about 1/3 of the group. So funny you should say that. So if we go to the next slide, thinking about our kaleidoscope model, what's worked for the KM leaders like Tiffany, and then the knowledge specialists who are assigned to any of those domains. The ability to partner, to build partnerships and have those relationships with a range of stakeholders. These could be any range, you know, comfortable working across, up and down, anywhere from C-suite to administrative assistant. It does not matter. You have to flex up and down that hierarchical ladder where politics can take shape. Awareness of cultural differences. We're a global company, global team. You could start your morning on one side of the world and end your day completely opposite time zone. So you just have to be able to aware time zones, cultural differences, nuances, how people work, how people like to work, what's kind of innate to them. Strong communicators, influencers, and change managers ties directly back to Lynda's research, the change management. And then there's something about our team's special sauce, knack for teaching and mentoring. So as the world becomes more digital, as the digital transformation kicks in, as you have to do a day job and learn new things on the day job, you're almost an advocate. You're an activator. You're the one that can use those influential skills and teach on the fly. So there's a lot of those kind of softer skills that help bring people together and engage. So with that, Tiffany, I'll hand it to you.
Thanks. So like we've talked about before, I'm going to cover a few 3 scenarios or cases on how we partner and work differently with different stakeholders. So if you think about the kaleidoscope, this is kind of the next level down. So the kaleidoscope talks about the groups that we work with. These are actually, we're going to be talking about individual stakeholders, you know, who they are, what we do with them, and how we do it. So going into the first case, this is about how KM partnered with multiple stakeholders during a large-scale research project. In this case, it is our Global Talent Trends, which is one of our biggest research studies that we do in Mercer. We're actually just in 2024 had our 9th year. We collected input from over 12,000 C-suite executives, HR leaders, employees, and investors. The KM team worked alongside many stakeholders throughout the project, starting with the initial planning and launch of the survey, all the way through to internal activation and external promotion of our report. In addition to the global report, multiple assets are created, including country and industry reports, client presentations, videos, articles, social media messaging, and internal learning materials. All of those things, KM has to step up and help to make sure that we're getting those into the right hands of the people who need them for their jobs. Consultants and sales professionals leverage all of these materials when they speak to their clients and assist them in determining what actions they can take to stay ahead. So who these folks are that we're working with and what are we doing with them and how? First off, we stayed aligned to the project plan for key milestones and deliverables by participating on regular project calls with project managers, researchers, and writers, all to keep apprised of the timing, the progress, and the overall launch plans. We also aligned plans for external promotion, including social media campaigns and those local country events that take place once we're ready to roll the report out. We did that by participating on monthly marketing team calls. And this also gave the KM team an opportunity to share what we were kind of doing in conjunction with those external plans from an internal perspective. We supported learning and internal communication activities, including the promotion of the learning events, the internal events that we offered to our colleagues, as well as coordinating all of the firm-wide updates via news pages that were created, placement, ensuring that messaging was getting put in various newsletters that are rolled out around the firm, posts on our Viva Engaged communities so that we were informing people that way, and then partnering with global learning and internal communication teams to devise the action plan that also included the timeline for each of these activities that took place. We led and updated our internal Global Talent Trends campaign page to provide quick access to the content and ensure findability of information via search and AI, et cetera. The designated knowledge specialists, so as Lisa mentioned, the folks on my team that support the practice and the stakeholders within the practices, we assigned an individual who would take on this responsibility, and it was her responsibility to partner with the Global Talent Trends project team. So that could have been anywhere from, these thought leaders, researchers, the writers, anyone involved in sort of the development of that content, the marketing team. So when they needed to align with us or to get help from us to help push things internally, that would be her responsibility to do that. So a really important role during that process. So if we move to the next scenario, this is how KM, there we go. This is how KM used colleague research, data, and insights to influence decision-making when we responded to the needs of our industry teams. On the right-hand side of the screen right now, you'll just see some examples of some of the tools that we used during this specific project. There were 3 primary issues that we were asked to solve for. These came from different stakeholders, which in most cases had very different views about what their issues were that they were trying to solve for. The first one came from the top. It was to support the firm-wide approach to how we would support the priority industries across the MMC portfolio. So not just within Mercer, but how we would stay connected across all of the 4 businesses within MMC. The second was from an industry expert perspective. So this was the need for them to find the best approach for pushing out communications, information, and content to colleagues. And then lastly were the colleagues themselves who were asking for easy ways to find experts, to ask questions, to get quick access to information, best in front and most updated content for a specific industry. So we interviewed colleagues from around the globe to determine what was the most important to them. What experience were they looking for? What content did they find most helpful? And what were they looking for that they weren't able to find? We then took the same approach when we talked to the industry experts to identify their specific needs. We partnered with each of the industry teams, sharing the findings from the discussions we had with colleagues, using data and insights to show what content was being most utilized, and then provided a gap analysis on what they were missing. We also worked with our subject matter experts and thought leaders to conduct a thorough content review process. We removed outdated and irrelevant content, And we ensured that we had the most up-to-date and content that was available. Also, again, aligning to that, what do colleagues need? What do they really want to see? Finally, we worked with members of our commercial teams as well as KM counterparts across MMC to agree on a firm-wide approach for establishing content priorities, setting up our industry communities and pages, and determining how we would manage all of that going forward. The outcome of that was that we identified members from Mercer's KM team. So again, our knowledge specialists, who were then assigned or aligned to each of our priority industry teams. And they would do regular review and curate content, and also assist with the Viva Engaged communities to help our industry teams drive engagement. This is sort of an ongoing partnership where the KSs are continuously using data and insights to help the industry teams make bigger decisions. So they have regular calls that they continue post-launch of all of this work that we did. They talk regularly, they give updates regularly, they share metrics on their sites and all that kind of thing. So this is definitely an ongoing partnership for them.
And Tiff, I just want to add on that example. We have a lot of actuaries at Mercer. We have a lot of people that like numbers, that like data, that like the science behind. And so we've often called that example doing research, say versus do. So here's what you say, but here's what you do. And so that research up front, knowing what people are asking for, where do we need to focus our time, pays off in the end. And as soon as you can show a chart, a diagram, a bar chart, whatever the output is, that example, that will carry a lot of weight in a very analytical population. So even some stuff we do behind the scenes, we don't share all of it, but other stuff we do share and say, listen, we listened to you, here's what the data said, and it can be qualitative and quantitative.
Yep.
So Tiffany, I was going back to the last slide because somebody in the chat wanted to see it again so they could kind of read. There's a lot of information on the slides. And there was also a question while you were talking through that last scenario as well, where somebody wanted to know, tell us about the KM team. How big is it? Is it one specialist for each domain, or kind of what does that look like? Help set that stage for the participants a little bit if you can.
I can answer it. I'll take that one. There are 5. So we're a team of, depending on the day, we have people coming and going, about 38. There are 5 leaders and we all have different domains. So Tiffany is one of 3, what we call practice leaders. So she has 2 counterparts, one for health, one for wealth, one for career. And then we have Justin, who's our digital enablement content management lead. Under all of them, or people management structure, there are 12 knowledge specialists. So that kaleidoscope wheel, that's how we divide up work. It's not necessarily to one, it's one KS, many domains, multiple. We have a team of, what are we up to? I think it's 17, 15 knowledge coordinators. Those are our hubs sitting mainly in Warsaw and Mexico City. And then we have what we call 4 innovators. They are keeping us on our front foot ahead of the curve. So content management, excellence, data and analytics, colleague research, and AI and automation. And last but not least, we have Diane on our team who manages all third-party subscriptions. We're very research-heavy organization because knowledge is what we do. Diane has a portfolio of 60 third-party contracts that we managed for research tools. In fact, he was a good example. APQC is another example. So that's kind of the diversity of how our roles are structured.
Thank you.
So just moving on, this is the last case example that we have. So this one is during an acquisition. The KM team's roles can vary both in terms of the level of complexity as well as who we partner with. So if we are looking at a full-scale acquisition, we may participate as team members on integration teams like HR or internal comms or technology. Or we may have our own established KM integration work stream. And that typically happens when the acquired company has a very robust knowledge management infrastructure already in place. if they have a robust team, as an example, that would require us to do a bit more work. In smaller acquisitions, where there's not as much of a KM infrastructure in place, we may just engage with learning managers to assist in the creation of onboarding plans, and then partner with internal communications to help educate folks internally through messaging or through training of new colleagues. So like for this specific example here, this was a more robust acquisition. So we had a little bit bigger role. We partnered with our internal communications team in preparing and launching a news page that aligned to the announcement of the deal. And then that kind of kicks things off from there. We worked with our global learning and regional teams to create onboarding plans and delivered virtual training sessions to help new colleagues navigate our intranet and find content and information they needed to do their jobs. We also assisted in bringing information and content from the acquired company into the Mercer ecosystem by working with our technology partners and our digital workplace team to ensure a smooth transition. And we also try to work really hard to find a way to have it be the least impactful way of doing it so that consultants can stay focused on delivering their client work. So we try to manage that as much as possible with as little interruption as possible. We also coordinate efforts with our marketing teams from both an acquired company perspective as well as Mercer. And we ensured that branded content is shared externally, that we are aligned to that internally as well. So finding a way to make sure that our colleagues internally have all the access to the information that we're sharing externally in the market with clients. And this we do typically through, sharing it via our internet solution pages, our sales toolkits, so that people can easily access that information. And then finally, we worked alongside the work stream teams that were creating the consolidation of the integrated solutions for clients to ensure that we had the internal alignment for educating colleagues about what our new solutions were that we were taking to market. And providing them easy access to contacts, to information and content in support of our go-to-market strategy. And I think we've got another poll. So in this case, we want to know what is your biggest challenge when working with stakeholders. And for this one, it's a write-in, so we're not going to have an online poll, but we want you to drop those into chat, and then we'll just kind of see what everybody has to say and chat a little bit about that.
While we're waiting for a couple of those to pop in, Tiffany, someone did ask the question on your last case study too that said, do you onboard your acquired colleagues like into your communities? Is that part of that process of an acquisition as well?
Yeah, so it does take a little bit of time when when colleagues come into the organization. So we do try to find ways to make sure that those folks get added into our communities so that they are able to access that information as quickly as possible. So yeah, I think trying to make sure that they quickly understand how to navigate through all of the various pages on our intranet. What the difference is between our MMC Colleague Connect intranet, how you get your benefits there, how you go into the Mercer environment to find the information that you need to do your jobs in our communities that are available, that kind of thing. So we try to walk them through all that, when we can do training sessions or
Sure.
Usually virtual sessions. Yeah.
That's awesome. And now you have a lot of challenges in the chat.
Let's see.
I've been reading them. There's definitely a theme around getting buy-in, explain what the two folks, like what KM, why it is important. That is definitely a huge, huge, huge theme. And I would say Mercer, for Mercer's story, if you think back to our storyline and our timeline, 2017 was the turning point for us because the head of strategy basically became the executive sponsor of KM. So prior to that, we were always siloed, working on our own. We weren't really totally unified. As soon as the head of strategy stepped in and said, form as one unified team, we had a mission. We came together. When you go down in the, org structure and still engaging, we sort of have, Tiffany, I would be curious in your opinion. I feel like we have top leadership support. And then I feel like we have maybe a little bit of a gap. I'm just going to be candid. Some of the senior leaders are very, very busy, but if you can find their lieutenants, their right hands, their program coordinators, their chief of staff, we can get in that way. So there's a lot of different levels to be pitching KM to. And then another thing, because I'm seeing like conflicting agendas and like, how do you align? We've started to do business planning together. Not always easy. September is the season right now where we're getting 2025 business plans. We get our hands on those business strategies for the following year. And wherever we can have those conversations. Where do we come together? Where do we need to focus? What are the priorities? For some teams, co-create that agenda together. There should be a knowledge component to pretty much anything. Figure out where you need to be and when and working with whom, and it can align. Not easy to do.
Lisa, you mentioned that you kind of had a game changer when your executive sponsor was the person in the strategy office. And can you talk about what that looked like then because a lot of the challenges are around building buy-in or just getting people to listen. How did that change? How did that help you? What did that person do to kind of help, I'll say, expand that?
Yeah, I think it's actually Tiffany's business leader. So he's dual hatting the president of the career practice, which is the domain Tiffany supports, and he's head of strategy for Mercer. He's always been a believer in knowledge management. We sell knowledge. This is what we do. That is our economy. That is our revenue. So it's really important. We were going through a spurt of acquisitions. Tiffany mentioned one more recent, but we were onboarding lots of new peoples and we were starting to work cross practice, busting those silos. And so in order to have that sort of knowledge flow, trip over it where you're at, you need the infrastructure under it supporting it. So breaking down those silos. We're a very tribal culture. Communities are very natural to us. And so we have niche pockets. That's great. That's fine. But sometimes you have to cut across. You have to find those intersections. So for us, having that sponsorship was just a game changer with the mission of come together, figure it out, you're one team. And our footprint originally was just for the practices, but it's now all enterprise. So having that senior support was very helpful. And Tiffany?
Yeah, and I would say too that as things evolved and we became more closely connected to the people who are building out our thought leadership and our go-to-market strategies, like what are our solutions, what are our products, as we got closer to those folks, I think that also was a game changer too, because we really got even more entrenched in the day-to-day of all of that. So I think that was really helpful as well.
Yeah. And there's sort of like a continuum where content gets developed, content should be managed. So there's this nice handoff and flow where we work with the content development thought leadership teams that are producing, like Global Talent Trends that Tiffany shared that example of. That's one of the many pieces they do. You need to have that continuity. You need to have that activation. You need to have that partnership. So you get the best value out of it. You could spend all this time creating content. Well, if it's not managed correctly or usable, accessible, findable, repurposable, then you don't have an ROI. So you need to sort of have that continuity of where content gets developed, expertise, communities, tribal knowledge flowing through to how do you access that information.
And
so
somebody,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, somebody asked a question about that it seemed like what we do in KM overlaps or is similar to internal communications and the training. And I would say that, and what the difference is. And I would say that we work extremely closely with our learning partners and our internal communication partners. It's just, we're just kind of connected in a lot of ways. We are really all about the content and how we get the messaging out about what's available for colleagues from a content perspective. I think, whether it's you're talking about learning content, which is managed a little bit differently. We have an internal learning management system that we use, but it also ties into, well, how do we train people? How do we give them the information they need even to understand the infrastructure that we have from a knowledge management perspective around finding content? So we just partner really closely with those folks, and then internal communications, they come to us a lot of the times, well, how can we help them elevate their message through our intranet or through our communities or through newsletters that go out, in various areas of the practices. So it's just helping them to get the message out, and then they help us too. When we have a really important message, we go to them and ask them to help us elevate that. So I think it's just a really close connection, but and closely aligned in what our goals are.
There's an interesting question in the chat that asks how you define the ROI for content.
This has been a tricky one. So this goes back to the say and do. We have qualitative metrics. So Ryan on our team, I think he's on this call, does a lot of research. That's his specialty area. So tell me what you value, tell me what you need. I will pass it along to the content development teams. Tell me a bit more how you're accessing, finding it. So we have the qualitative, and we try to marry it with the quantitative. So Tommy, one of our innovators, is all about KPI dashboards, go behind the scenes in the SharePoint Online libraries, get every possible metric under the sun, but put it on a very clean dashboard that we can all use. So if you can blend the value, the qualitative, what people want, what people say they desire, with the actual, here's what's getting used, you start to tell your story of an ROI. Obviously, we're very internal focused because our knowledge management team is internal. So our goal is to raise awareness with our employee population, but you can extend that, take global talent trends as the example, Tiffany's world. How do you activate that externally? What's getting used on the Mercer.com website? How many social media hits are out there? So it's really that continuum. We're internal doing the activation for our colleagues, but you can flow through external with sales leads, revenue generation, downloads of content externally, prospects asking about the content. So it's a little bit squishy, but you try to find the qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah, and I think ensuring that we're able to tell the story.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you look at the numbers, it's not always about, it's not really the story. So if you have a new piece of content and you put it out there, people are going to grab it right away. So your numbers are going to go really high, and then they may slack off. It doesn't mean that the content's still not important. It just means that probably everybody already accessed it. They already have it on their hard drives. So you kind of have to know how to tell that story. And you obviously see like peaks and valleys of content, depending on if there's town halls or if somebody, if one of our senior leaders is talking about something and they mention it, all of a sudden we see a spike in the content access. So it's always good to have that underlying message to share with your leaders too.
Can I throw one more question at you, and then I'll let you get to your wrap-up slide, because I know you have a lot of things on there too, but there's some good questions and comments in here. The last one, it's the last one on here that somebody's asking the question more specifically around the change management. So was this specifically your focus, was to go out and develop those skills? What did you use for a framework? And do you see KM having that responsibility, or did you partner like with a change specialist or a change organization? Maybe give a little detail around that.
I'll start, but Tiff, you add on. All of us have taken change management training. Coincidentally, our learning group, coincidentally, a teammate who happened to report into Tiffany at the time led us through change management, and it was twofold. It was change management for us. How do we go through change as a KM team? Because once you understand it for yourself, a little bit like therapy, you're able to coach others. So we have used various models, but we have all done change management training. It's also part of consulting. Like I'll just say candidly, it is a part of what we deliver to clients, where we're starting somewhere, we're analyzing where they need to be. This is how you get there. Let's walk you through that change. So it's kind of, whether we say it formally or informally, it's kind of just how we work. Tiff, I don't know what you think.
I love that.
Well, I was just thinking, we don't always get it right. Sometimes we learn by, going through the process of, understanding what people really need to hear from us. and how do we help people go through that change. So sometimes we're going through the change at the same time as our stakeholders, and we have to understand what their needs are in terms of what information they need and when they need it, and what information is not important to share versus what is really important to share. So I think it's also trial and error as we go through, but I think change is a huge portion of our job and trying to help people through that whole process.
And we've done a lot on personas. So we have 7 major personas in our company, kind of boiled down to 7, lots of different roles in the company, but they're kind of 7 big groupings of personas. We've done a lot of personality tests, and, that person, they're going to want data. You got to show them data. We know that's how they tick, whereas someone else is going to want to roll their sleeves up and join the project with you. So you have a range of personalities to accommodate for as you're engaging with them. So know yourself, and then know how to reach out to others. And you may have to shift how you typically do it to accommodate for their style.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. And if you're interested, we have 6 years and probably more of case studies in our resource library on Mercer, and you will find a lot of these varying topics that we're talking about today that they're answering questions on, and probably in varying stages of maturity, right? Over the years, as you see see what your company has done and how they've developed. So I love that. And if there are any if there are any additional questions left in the chat that we don't get to today, we'll make sure we shoot those over to Lisa and Tiffany and give them an opportunity to answer those. And we'll make sure that those are part of our summary write-up for the webinar as well. So just so you know, we will make sure everything gets captured.
Sounds good. So just to recap, and interestingly, some of these things we're talking about is in our recap. So the main objective of this slide is to highlight the role of KM in managing change and driving innovation. As influencers, bridge builders, translators, and change agents, we have the responsibility to take people on the change journey. So it's important to manage the change ongoing, not just as a big event, and also ensure that we're continuously introducing new things such as AI. AI is such a big topic right now, and we're learning. It's kind of what I was mentioning before, but it's like we're going through that change. We're learning internally, how are we going to use AI, but we also need to make sure our colleagues are sort of on that same journey. So we're helping, within the firm, we're helping to make sure that those messages are getting out, and we're talking to people about AI. So those kinds of things need to be ongoing conversations. Also, to effectively adapt to our audience and stakeholders, we need to use different approaches and create a two-way street to overcome resistance to change. We participate in content curation and management discovery and decision-making calls, bringing in experts from different voices to influence the conversation, and also to validate our proposed approaches. So sometimes as a KM leader for a specific practice, people are used to hearing from me. They're used to talking to me and, hearing what I have to say. And sometimes it's helpful if I can grab, Justin from our team who's, driving innovation to say, Justin, come on and, talk to these folks about what we're doing and what you think best practice should be. Sometimes it's just hearing that different voice that helps people go, oh, okay, now I get it, kind of thing. We also, additionally, as Lisa mentioned before, we leverage KM-led colleague research, quick surveys, we do one-on-one interviews, we do workshop sessions, all of that to build partnerships and to gather feedback. And again, our primary focus is on content, but our digital workplace team does a lot of this from a UA perspective, to understand what colleagues really need and how do we meet their needs. So by doing all of that, we really create strong relationships to drive successful change initiatives. And that's our goal.
It's fabulous. I love it. There's, you know what this tells me? KM teams need lots and lots of skill sets, right? I mean, think about the magnitude of what sometimes those knowledge management teams are responsible for or being asked to help the business with, right? From strategy to change to IT to project management, consulting, everything, and the kitchen sink, right? And maybe tell us a little bit, because that you have a pretty large team and you're in a large organization. But how do how do you distinguish that? Where do you draw the line with the KM team, and when you decide that's a partnership that we will have with another organization, right? Where do you, because I think some KM teams might struggle. We do this in our team or we don't do this at our team. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you just
It's hard. I mean, Tiff, I don't know what you feel. I feel like we do have existing relationships, so it's established. But if you think about the work that we get requested, some days we have to say no. Like, you know what? This is not the mission of KM. This is not our core. Stick to the core. That's going to be a distraction. We've been told it's okay to dial down on things, not overreach, complete what we do. Tiffany, you were on a call this morning. We went through the whole project list together. You know, like we really have to program manage where we're spending our time and resources, or you could get sucked into something that's not value added or takes you off your core principle, your mission.
Yeah, we created a document for our own use that kind of outlines, you know, where we, you know, what is in our wheelhouse, you know, what do we partner on? Like, we may not do it entirely for you, but we'll partner with you to help you through, and what we're going to totally refer to somebody else. And so I think we try to get our team to think about that when somebody comes to them with a problem or a question or an issue that they need solved for. You know, we try to think through that. Okay, is this really something we should be doing? Is this something that, like, because we're good corporate citizens, we're going to help partner and say, you know, give them guidance, but really they own it? Or are we going to say, look, this is something you need to go to this other group for, and they can help you? And we make those connections. We don't just say no. We try to steer them in the right way. So it's hard.
Actually, part of external consulting, what our consultants do, we do for you, and that's going to be, you know, certain dollar fee. We do with you, less expensive, or, you know what, we can't do this for you. Thanks for thinking of us, but we're going to refer you elsewhere. So kind of 3 buckets, and we apply that internally. Yep.
I like that. That's a good way to think about it. So we have just a couple minutes. Does anybody have, and I think there might be a couple questions in the chat. Somebody asked a question around how do you manage, I know it's in here somewhere, it's back a little ways, when you have 2 organizations that are coming together, because you talked about acquisitions, how do you start sharing the knowledge when you've got 2 coming together and there's a lot of things that might still be sensitive and things like that? How do you manage that scenario?
Yeah, Lisa, I think you can jump in too, but I think usually we start off, we always have to, you know, sign agreements when we get involved, you know, especially early on, if the deal hasn't closed yet. So we get a lot of access to content and information. I think we have various integration teams working on various pieces. And so they a lot of times we might not be involved in that coming together of the content, or, you know, what are those new offerings going to be to colleague or, you know, to our clients. But as things progress, we start looking at that content. And if there's things that shouldn't be shared broadly, we typically, you know, help guide them to use Teams, to share in Teams. They may have their own, you know, systems that they use initially to start sharing that content. So typically by the time it gets to us, it is kind of something that can be shared broadly.
It's always a challenge with an acquisition.
Yeah. We sometimes are part of the NDAs ahead of time, not always needed. So it's just, we get folded what's called a books and records work stream, and we often lead the KM work stream. And we do the same for divestitures. We have companies that have spun off outside Mercer, and we've spun them off. So same kind of situation. What knowledge needs to go with them? What stays? How do you make that partnership work in that blurry space where you're spinning them off? So that content curation becomes really, really critical.
Absolutely. Well, I think we are just about at time. I don't see any more additional questions actually in the chat at the moment. And Brittany is putting a reminder in the chat for you all to let you know that you will receive a copy of the slides, and also a satisfaction survey for this webinar. It helps us, it helps our presenters to know where we've done well and where we can continue to improve and bring you new and interesting topics. So please take an opportunity to fill those out. And I can't thank Lisa and Tiffany enough for coming and sharing their stories. I know how busy everyone is, so we really appreciate the hour. that you spent with us, and for tolerating a little bit of our technical challenges at the beginning of the day. It was one of those days, right? This is what we do in KM. We learn our lessons and we move forward. So that's what we're going to do. But with that, I'm going to say thank you again. And I hope that we all see you. If you haven't signed up for the roundtable that's coming up in a couple weeks, there's still time. Or we hope to see you on a future webinar or at another APQC event. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.